Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another Atlanta Falcons podcast. I'm your host, Will McFadden, joined by Tori McElhaney. Tori is just saluting and waving, and she's got the summer energy and the good vibes. And you're coming off of a big weekend, Tori. You want to tell everybody why?
Yeah, so a group of us from the Falcons organization went to the Southeast Emmys Awards this past weekend on Saturday and came home with 3 Emmys, which
congratulations.
Was a huge,
Woo! Yeah, that's awesome. Let's go.
Big dub. One for, I don't know if people remember, but when Matt Ryan retired, our video team put together a video where he wrote a letter to the city of Atlanta. And it was this really nice video of him and everything encompassing his career in his words. And Matt Ryan was actually on the trophy for that. Like, they submitted him as a creator for that
as
video.
They should.
So Matt Ryan is now a Emmy Award winner.
Let's go.
Fun fact for people
First
now.
step for the EGOT.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Step.
Matt Ryan, EGOT winner.
Yeah.
Wait for that Tony Award winning play coming to you in 2037.
Get ready. So that one, our On the Rise series presented by Delta won, which is something, it is a huge endeavor. Gosh, week after week, month after month for our video team. Literally, whoever the editor is for each individual show, they go down to the edit bay and we literally don't see them for a week because that's all they're doing. And then
I'm like scared of the edit bay. I told Taylor Vismore for the other day I'd actually never been inside of one because I kept hearing about it like they were the cupboard under the stairs in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
It's like I don't even want to go in there. I'm gonna get trapped.
Dark.
It's scary. Yeah, it's dark and lonely. So I
like
finally saw one. It's not, but they spend a lot of time in there.
They do.
Doing amazing work.
And then the third and final Emmy Award, very close to my heart, was the Grady Jarrett Year 10 documentary. One for Best Sports Documentary. I was so proud of that for Mark Whittingham and I. I mean, I said on this podcast when we talked about it, like, that was such a labor of love, that whole documentary, and getting to tell Grady Jarrett's story in a time where we just kind of were like, oh, we're doing this to celebrate 10 years in Atlanta, not knowing at the time that it was going to be his last year in Atlanta. And so now, even looking back on that project, it's even more meaningful that we were able to almost send him to the next part of his career. To
like close the chapter in with a really nice kind of fitting bow.
Yeah, and like let him know, like, hey, you're loved in Atlanta regardless if you're here or not, man. And so I think it was just, we don't do it for the trophies. We don't do any of this, I think, for the recognition or anything like that. But when you do get the recognition, especially from your peers, like it matters. It's meaningful, and I'm immensely grateful. And I don't know, just being able to experience that with our team, it was just fantastic. So I have my It's a Great Day to Be a Woman in Sports mug, and it's because it is. It is a great day to be a woman in sports, and I'm really, really proud of the team and really excited for what we're doing next because we do have a lot of things on the docket.
Yes, but congratulations once again. We talk a lot about the football team here, and rightfully so, but just wanted to take a minute to shout out the digital team of which we are a part and all of the incredible work that everybody here does, including yourself. Honestly, I thought you were just going to say you won the U.S. Open or something based on the way that you're dressed.
Well,
I didn't even know about the Emmys.
If you were to look at me right now, you're like, wow, she's going to go get in a quick 9 after the podcast is over. That's not true. I don't really play golf. I'm just a big proponent of golf fashion for women.
Annika Sorenstam over here. All right, yes, but we have a mailbag to get to today. We should maybe get into the main reason that you guys are here, which is to answer some questions. Thank you all to everybody who submitted questions, be it on Twitter. Still just going to keep on saying Twitter. Or if you did it's a letter. Get out of here. Or if you did it online via our mailbag submission, which you can always send it to. We are, discussing potentially other avenues through which you can reach our shows, but that is TBD for now. Tori, you ready to answer some questions?
I am so ready. I love when we do a mailbag segment of the pod.
It was the perfect time, I felt like, to do one. Yeah. Right? Mini camp's wrapped up. We've got a long break, a little bit of a summer break here. So let's dig into the first one. This comes to us from @Damsky32. He asks, in your opinion, do you think Jalon Walker, all his snaps as an edge, or will he take on more responsibility as the season goes along? And do you believe the combo of Dorlus and Zach Harrison at their big end will help with sack production this year? So we'll start with Jalon Walker first.
Jalon Walker, I think, even though They have said from the moment that they drafted him, he's going to be primarily an edge rusher, and they've really stuck with that. You ask Jeff Ulbrich, you have asked Raheem Morris, you ask Jalon Walker himself.
Yep.
That's what they're saying. Do I believe that for a second? No. Personally, no.
Are you allowed to say that, Tori?
It's me. This is Tori McElhaney personally saying this.
No, but you're not wrong.
Right?
At all.
They can, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe at the end of the season, he has only taken predominantly edge rusher snaps in a traditional edge rusher role. Maybe I am eating my words. I don't think
this is gamesmanship.
This is I do not think that sitting here right now today, going into the summer and going into Jalon Walker's first training camp, he may start out very simplistic edge rusher role, but I don't think that's where he ends up at the end of the season. I think that you go out and you get a talent like Jalon Walker, but the reason you get him is not solely because of what he does as a traditional edge rusher. You get him because of what the versatility he provided and the chess piece that he is. That's why you value him at a number 15 overall pick.
Yep.
So I think that while I understand exactly what they're saying. They don't want to overwhelm him. They don't want to give him too much on his plate in his rookie year. They don't want to do all this. They want to kind of ease him in, and maybe one day they'll add in some different looks for him. I think that actually that one day comes quicker than what maybe they even think it will. Because I think when you're looking at Jalon Walker and his football IQ and what he's already done at Georgia and the different ways that this roster is constructed along the defensive front and, I don't know, this attack style front that they want to play, there's no reason to not, in my opinion, utilize his talent.
Well, and you're completely right. And
thank you. Thank you.
Later on, I recently spoke with ESPN's Ben Solak, and I asked him literally this question.
Yeah.
And he gave a very similar answer. So stay tuned for that. You guys can hear that coming on the feed a little bit later on. But you and I spoke about this on our mini camp kind of wrap-up podcast, which, spoiler alert, that's going to prove to be a little bit of a Rosetta Stone for today's episode as well. So if you have not heard that and you want to press pause, maybe go check that one out first, because we touched on a lot of great stuff there. And one of the topics was this idea of the hybrid style defense, right? And the 3-4, which is really a 5-man front versus a 4-3. And that's where I kind of think you can be both. Both can be true with Jalon Walker. I do actually think that because the most valuable asset and the most needed asset for this Falcons defense would be a pass rusher. So it makes sense to utilize him there most. He is your highest investment this offseason. He has a really high upside in that area, so use him there and use him there often. But when you do maybe go to that 4-3 look, bring him back into that linebacker spot. It doesn't make sense to necessarily just take him off of the field when he can play multiple levels. So I do think that he could very well play 65% of his snaps off the edge this season, and probably should. That would be a good role for him. But I would also love to see 35% of those snaps moving all around the field.
Yeah, because to Damski's question.
Damski, let's go.
Damski, in your opinion, do you think Jalon will see all of his snaps at edge?
No.
The answer to that is no. I do not think that. And I think that something that I know Jeff Ulbrich is really cognizant of is he doesn't want to be just this gimmicky defense. He doesn't want to, and when you have someone like Caden Ellis, who already lends to kind of this hybrid role in and of himself that we saw him have a lot of success with last year and even his last year with the New Orleans Saints organization, you don't want to do too much of that gimmickiness.
Right.
Because then it becomes...
Well, just think about last year when they started using Caden in that different way, they started losing the games. That's the thing, is I think what Jeff is getting at is that when you have to start creating with scheme ways to manufacture pressure on a quarterback, you have to give up some things somewhere else, right? And if you're able to just generate with your players, you can scheme for other elements and allow your players to then execute and win because of their own natural ability and dominance and kind of traits like that. So I kind of think that's where he was getting at. And last season, you kind of saw that may have been, they tried that approach early on, and then it was we got to get Caden unlocked here a little bit, and we got to start amping up the simulated pressures. We got to start dropping Matthew Judon into coverage a little bit more because we're bringing Caden. So it's kind of where you get into that.
And you do have the trade-off of if you're bringing Caden up, at the time you had nothing against Nate Landman, but he's not really someone that you want in coverage too often.
Yep.
So now you have a little bit, personnel has changed a little bit with Divine Diablo. Like, I do think that to the point of scheme versus players, it's why I think we have heard so much about having this like proactive attacking front where they're not sitting back and waiting. Kind of the conversation we talked about being proactive, not reactive up front, having your players just go win their one-on-ones. If you have your guys winning your one-on-ones, I don't really care. Like, because that, like, at that point, if JPJ is getting the quarterback off of his spot once every 2-3 plays, cool, sounds good.
Well, and it's going to allow you also to play a more aggressive style on the boundary, which we know Jeff Holbrick likes to do. He played a little bit more man than the Falcons did last year, and they were playing this off-zone coverage, partially because I think that they needed to blanket the receivers to give the pass rush time as opposed to we'll jam and disrupt, and if we lose them after that, there's some risk associated with that. But we trust that our pass rush, in the time that we're jamming and disrupting that route, they're going to get home.
Well, that was something that I specifically talked to my Qs about, because I was like, how can this front in this new year, how is it different? How do you think from a scheme perspective, from a mentality perspective, how do you feel like it's different? How do you feel like this helps you guys in the back end? And he said this exact same thing. He's like, it's timing.
Yep.
He was like, it's not allowing the receivers to get to the top of the route because the quarterback is having to make a decision well
quicker.
Before then. He was like, that helps us. That allows us to maybe get some more hands on the ball. Like, that allows us to maybe cover up some routes. So I to your point, it all plays in off of each other, and it's all something that I think these players are cognizant of.
Yep. So two players who are going to be playing off of each other, and the rest of the defensive line, Brandon Dorlus, Zach Harrison. Do we think that those two, if they're being situated as kind of these like big 5 technique end players, is that more for run defense, or do you think that that is by design to get this pass rush going?
I do think that if I'm just thinking about it, and having seen what I think Zach Harrison put on tape last year, and granted he was in a bit more of a different role, a bit more of a traditional interior guy. That's what they wanted him as. With this, it's going to be a bit more fluid for him in this year, in this scheme. But I really liked what I saw from him in his run defense. And I think the reason why you kind of have him as this big end type of role is to set that edge, to make sure a running back can't bounce it to the outside. So that to me is like, yes, everything, the goal is obviously going to be for this defense. No, there is literally no ands, ifs, or buts about it, is pass rush. You had to put everything you had into pass rush in order to get even to the middle quartile of the league in pass rush stats. But I think what we're actually going to see, especially with this Zach Harrison specifically, Brandon Dorlus is a bit more of a question mark to me because we haven't really seen him all that much. I feel like I know a lot more about Zach Harrison and the way that he performed as a run stopper last year.
Yeah, when you think of Zach Harrison, there are like 5 plays that immediately come to mind.
Right.
When you think of Brandon Dorlus, it's a little bit fuzzier.
Right, exactly. So I think if Brandon Dorlus is following along in this like Zach Harrison mold, then okay, yes, I get it. But I will say that even though everything we're talking about is pass rush, this is still a defense that has to stop the run too. Like, you can't have one without the other because then one's going to get taken advantage of.
Because the reason the pass rush also benefited last year was better performance first and second down.
Exactly.
So you got to have those all marry together.
And I do think that Zach Harrison was a big part of that.
He was.
I think that to me is why, even though, yes, we're talking about sack production, we're talking about all that kind of stuff, perhaps in run defense and run stopping ability, that matters even maybe a little bit more.
Yes, 100%. I will also add, just with kind of the run fits and the way you're playing defense, if they do get to a point where they are manufacturing with some of this creativity and they're moving guys around, and let's say you've got Jalon Walker outside of Zach Harrison and they kind of loop and twist, to have that, you want to be able to bake in at least a level of comfort with the run if you are still moving guys after the snap. So Zach Harrison could be a good pass rusher off the edge. Yeah. He's also a great run setter but can play inside. So having him and Brandon Dorlus, my favorite thing about him coming out of Oregon was just 3 technique, 1 technique, 5 technique, 7 technique. It's whatever, like everywhere. We're just like using him all over the place, and he was effective. So I like both of those guys. Really interested to see them this year. But next question comes from @Xander Sticklin, not Strickland. You got me there. Do we think it's Xander or Xander?
Xander.
Okay, Xander, not Xavier?
No, yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's the thing. It was like with Xavier Watts.
I know. That's why I'm asking.
Like some people call him Xavier, some people call him Xavier. I need to like ask him that.
Right. So Xander asks, are there any free agents or trades you could see the Falcons pursuing, or do you feel the roster is pretty set going into the season?
I'm going to whisper this, but Kirk Cousins, right? Like, he's the trade. He's the trade option. He's the one that you're always going to kind of pencil in. You're always going to put a little asterisk beside because nothing's changed. You know, he's still an option. And I think again, it's every conversation we've had this offseason. It's when is a team going to need a quarterback?
Sure. Yeah. It's
right.
He's on the proverbial trade block.
Right.
It's like everybody's aware that if you need a team, the Falcons would be on the short list of teams that you would call, right? It's same way where if we're looking at the draft, when the Falcons had 5 picks and we were looking at teams where maybe if you're going to try to accrue more, you naturally look at the teams that have 11 picks or 10 picks, not the teams that have like 6 picks. So
if we're not talking about Kirk Cousins and we're not...
And maybe any external, like if they're going the Justin Simmons, Matthew Judon route, do you see any guys that make sense maybe still available?
So I'm trying to think of like a...
Maybe Justin Simmons or Matthew Judon themselves?
Maybe. But something that I think we have spoken about that's flying under the radar a little bit this offseason is the wide receiver position.
Yep.
And
love that.
We know Drake London, we know Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, Kadarius Hodge has become this kind of jack of all trades guy, special teams guy that the front office loves.
Just a hodgepodge.
Just a hodgepodge of Kadarius Hodge. And those are your kind of core 4.
Love it.
But there are also some like free agents that I know, undrafted free agents that I think a lot of people are excited about. But I also think that you're constantly with that 4th or 5th receiver, you're constantly looking outside to see who could maybe come in and provide special teams relief. You know, there's also this whole idea of the Falcons now that Avery Williams is no longer on this team, who's, you know, punt returning, who's kickoff return. Like
I think Jamal Agnew is probably the pencil in. But yeah, they could always, like they did with Rondale Moore.
Yeah, you always kind of think about that bottom part of the roster churning. And I think like that's the part of, if we're looking at free agents, like some wide receiver free agents, some like core special teams free agents, like those are the ones that I think from now until the point of training camp you would
for sure
be looking at.
Same like with day 3 of the draft, you always look at, okay, they played special teams, all 4 special teams units. They had 1,000 kick return yards. Yeah, that's going to make them more valuable to a team.
Right? Like, and maybe like a center. You know, I know we're talking about Ryan New's little like being the guy, and there's no ands, if, or buts about that. But if, you know, something happens to where you could bring in some extra competition to that position, maybe you want to do that for camp or even later on. I think that what's funny is I do feel like the roster is pretty set going into training camp.
Yep.
So all of these like little positions that we're talking about, outside of Kirk Cousins, of course, because he's an outlier, but all these other positions are just kind of like for depth. Or for, you know, pull shoot in case of emergency type of thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back. It does feel like this has been one of the most just intentional, but like sparse off seasons in terms of just acquisition. In some ways, like the most notable moves were the departures, but that's not. Sometimes when that is the case, it would signal a bad offseason. I think this was a good offseason for Atlanta because I think that slowly but surely, if you look at the big pull-out 4-year project, the roster has slowly been getting kind of a step at a time in the right direction. And we talked about this last year, you know, with none of the rookies being on that opening day depth chart. And it's like, that's a sign of the strength that you have in building that depth. Because 2 years ago, it was like all rookies, and it was Deron Harmon on a 1-year deal, and it was, you know, a kind of piecemealed roster. And so now, you feel like you're in a better spot. And you just really needed to go out and add a few of those key guys. So sure, I think they could, you know, potentially always add like another, I don't even know. Yeah, it's like
right. That's the thing is like
I'm trying to be like corner, no. Nickel, certainly no. Linebacker, no.
I'm
D-line, no. Wide receiver, maybe.
Maybe right, but then
but this is an offense that only like it's Puka and it's Cooper Kupp. Like those are your 2,000-yard receivers, and they're not. This is kind of like the Bucs offense where it's Mike Evans and it's Chris Godwin. So like you got Darnell and you got Drake, you got Kyle Pitts, you got Bijan Robinson, you got Tyler Algier. That's a lot of mouths to feed. Do we need to go get Keenan Allen? Probably not.
Probably not.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, so,
that's my thing is I was like, this is like, I feel like we're kind of filibustering this, like the answer to this question, but
I think we're giving great answers here.
I think that it's truly like, there isn't really a lot of needs. Like at this point in time, until injuries set in, which that was kind of, I know Terry Fonten and Raheem Morris said that wasn't the case, that like they had Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon that they were already in the back of their mind. But I think the injuries too, Braylon Trice and DeMarco Helms, and when they happened, like that does change your direction.
And
I think
it can't be ignored. It happened right there.
And I think it accelerates maybe conversations.
For sure.
And I think so maybe we're having a different conversation in training camp or even the first part of the season. But at this point in time right now, I'm kind of cool letting things lie for the summer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you keep whatever reservoir you have for any unforeseen instances. So totally agree with you there. I think that is kind of the approach. Never know if any late training camp moves will happen again, but we just, at this point, who knows?
We're cool.
So
we're just hanging. We're vibing.
Next question comes from @FalconsPlayBR, and it basically says, what position battles are you most looking forward to in training camp?
To that, I say go listen to the 40 minutes of podcasting that we did last week, where we talked about exactly this, which position battles that we were most excited to see in training camp. And I'll give you
just a real quick one.
Safety. Nickel.
There you go.
And edge rusher. And then also maybe a little bit, I'll throw this in. We didn't talk about this the last time, but I'll throw it in as a new one, or not a new one, but Divine Diablo, Troy Anderson, and what the Falcons ultimately decide to do there. Troy Anderson returning from injury. Divine Diablo, I think, is the guy penciled in right now. But can Troy Anderson kind of make when he's played, he hasn't played that often, but when he's played, he's been meaningful.
NFC Defensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, like he's had meaningful moments when we've seen him. The problem is we haven't seen him that often because of injuries or what have you. So the Divine Diablo Troy Anderson conversation is another one that I would add to the conversation that we already had previously last week.
Yeah, so go check out that podcast. I will add that one I'm looking forward to is who's going to come away with lead ball boy. I've got my eye on a couple of candidates. I'm going to keep you guys really up to date on that one.
Are you throwing your hat into the ring?
Oh, God, no. I can't do what they can do. Have you seen these guys? They're incredible.
I try not to run.
It's like red lightning's just all over the place out there. It's crazy. One other that kind of pairs back to our conversation at the end of minicamp has to do with safety. This comes from @HughesAlfred. It says, it seems like we might have a small logjam at safety with Fuller, Watts, Helms. How do we think it's going to work out? How do we think it'll kind of play out throughout the season, both beginning and then later on? We touched on that, again, kind of last week, so go check that out. But the third part of this question that I want to dig into a little bit here is, what do we think a dream scenario would be for this position group? And we can kind of start by what is that question even getting at? Is it a dream scenario for the group itself in terms of, overall performance within the defense, or is it more like a certain player shining or stepping up, or how things play out? How do you want to choose to answer this question?
So for me, I think it's collectively how they're performing as a group, yes, but that hinges upon one name, and that's Xavier Watts.
Okay.
And what I want to get at with this dream scenario is, who Jesse Bates is. I have no qualms. Jesse Bates is already a dream scenario just in general. He is the dream. So that is what it is. The part of it that I think would make it an even better dream, an even more beautiful dream, is if Xavier Watts, within the first 6 weeks of his rookie year, shows us mirror image of what Jesse Bates was when he was young. And I think that...
I thought you were going to ask him to be Jesse Bates in 6 weeks. I was like, wow.
No. Absolutely not. I'm talking like
high threshold.
Show us, like that's his player comp.
For sure.
His player comp coming out of Notre Dame, his player comp throughout the entire pre-draft.
Yep.
The player that he said he mimics his game after is Jessie Bates.
So can the first two steps on the beach of your NFL career be the same footprints in the sand as Jessie Bates?
And I think if that happens, you will see that continue to unlock Jessie Bates, continue to unlock what the Falcons are doing outside corner with A.J. Terrell and Mike Hughes. And I just think if you get Xavier Watts playing at a high level very early on, that is a dream scenario not only for this year and his pairing with Jessie Bates in this first year together, but also who Xavier Watts could be 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And so that to me is the dream scenario, because you know the production Jessie Bates has. If Xavier Watts, to your point, is just like following along in his footsteps and he mirrors what Jessie Bates was in Jessie Bates' first or second year, I'll take that. That is the dream scenario.
I think that's a great one. I think for me it's a little bit more, if guys can find specialized roles in this first year, or in Marco Hellam's case, year 3, and you maybe find your key one
niche
in Jessie Bates, and he's on the field every single play, but then around him, and if it's Jordan Fuller kind of operating in a more traditional safety role next to him, or it's Xavier Watts, sure. But if you can find a very key specific niche for DeMarco Hellams, a nice role for either Fuller or Watts, and almost have kind of the way you could match an offense, the way we think about with a front seven, kind of like, oh, they're going big at the goal line, so now we're going big, or now they've got, they're spreading out, so we're going smaller, and we've got all those. If you can really play with that at the next, at the safety level too, I think that is going to take this defense to its maximum capacity creatively on the back end. So that would be a dream scenario for me, is more, can you identify those clear roles, and do they play off of each other, almost like a good basketball team?
Love it.
Yep. So let's get to our next question. This is from @ATL_Samir2401. And we're going back to the defensive line. What do we foresee Zach Harrison's role being in this defense? And is it fair to assume that he will get significantly more snaps than he did in his first 2 years?
So I'll start with the second part of that question, because
I think he was around like 320-ish snaps last year. Let me double check that.
I know, go check that and go see what his average was like per game, because I think that it's actually, his first year was what it was, but I think his second year he actually had more impactful moments and was playing more snaps. Like in terms of like, I also think that the best defensive fronts to me sometimes are the ones that mimic hockey lines. I'm watching a lot of the Stanley Cup, Go Cats, right now, so I'm thinking a lot about hockey. But how they do have like their rotations and guys coming off of the bench, like that's how some of the best, I think, defensive fronts and most elaborate defensive fronts are operating. And so to me, it's like, do we think we'll see Zach Harrison more than what we saw him last year? I do think yes, because I think you're going to need him a bit more, and you have more of a specific role for him this year in terms of being a playmaker for this defense. So the answer is yes, but it's not like an astronomical yes. It's not a yes where I'm sitting here being like, Zach Harrison is going to play in 75% of the defensive snaps every single game, because I don't think that's it.
So he played 268 snaps last season.
Really?
24% of the defensive snaps.
Oh, I think it's up then.
In year 1, he played like 340-something snaps, and that was about 30% of the defensive snaps. So he actually ticked down last year.
Interesting.
But he switched inside, and again, I think the defense.
Interesting.
Obviously, there were a lot of changes. Ryan Nielsen gone, Jimmy Lake in. Like the defense was totally different. So that happens sometimes, especially with a young player. It's
interesting because I feel like he was more impactful. Maybe this is why I thought he played more, is because he was more impactful last year than I thought he was in his first year.
Probably a really good like efficiency usage. Like when he was out there, good things were happening. And so it's like put him out there.
Right.
I think this year we would love to see an uptick in that usage, and I think he's earned it. I think again, more familiarity between the coaching staff and him, and kind of his familiarity with the scheme and what's being asked of him. I know it's changing a little bit to the attack style, but Zach Harrison is kind of the type of player that can, I think, do a lot of different things, and he has a really interesting body type. He might just be a player who his career is defined by the versatility and usage, a little bit like Brandon Dorlus, and he just moves around everywhere. So let's go ahead and kind of wrap up quickly here with our last two. This one comes from at Landon Castro. Sleeper impact player for next season, one on offense, one on defense.
All right, one on offense. This is not a sleeper, but Darnell Mooney. I said last year going into training camp, I was like, put Darnell Mooney on your fantasy team because I think that he's going to be very impactful and he's going to get you a lot of points. And I'm happy to report that he did. And I do think that, I know we're talking a lot, I wrote about this in the mailbag this past week, but we're talking a lot about Drake London's connection with Michael Penix Jr. We need to be talking about Darnell Mooney's connection with him just as much because I think that Darnell Mooney is going to go and he's going to be an impact player in 2025. In the same vein that he was in 2024. So that's my offense. Do you want to, since I took offense, do you want to take defense or do you want me to give a defensive one too?
Here, let me give a couple on offense actually because I'm trying to decide in real time between these two and maybe you can help me figure it out. One is Matthew Bergeron.
Yeah. I almost said Matthew Bergeron.
Okay, then let's do Matthew Bergeron. Yeah. Will be my pick. I think he's definitely going to be an impact player. I almost toyed with Chris Blair. But that's a real sleeper pick for me because I'm not even sure roster status and stuff like that. But he looks good. He looked good in minicamp. Physically, he looked in the best shape of his life coming into training camp. Newsflash. Defense, you got one?
Defense, I think Mike Hughes. Everyone's gonna talk about this defensive front. Everyone's gonna talk about AJ Terrell. Everyone's gonna talk about Jesse Bates. Everybody's gonna talk about these rookies. Mike Hughes, I thought, had a good year last year. When he was healthy, I thought he was putting up numbers and percentages that were very close to what AJ Terrell. And AJ Terrell is heralded as one of the best corners in the game right now. I thought Mike Hughes held his own as CB2. Yeah. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the first time in AJ Terrell's career, he has a running mate that was the same as the year previous and on the opposite side of him. Yep. And I think that Mike Hughes held his own. I think he was a sleeper. I don't think he got enough credit for what he did last year. And I think that that's why I'm kind of picking him to carry over into 2025 as someone that we haven't had a chance to talk a lot about.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's a great pick. I would have said Divine Diablo maybe 3 weeks ago, but I feel like we bumped him into the properly rated category.
Right, yeah.
So I think Brandon Dorlus, DeMarco Hellams, two young guys. Again, I'm really having trouble. I'm indecisive today. But Braylon Trice is a great one.
That could be a good one.
It's these young guys. There's a lot of young guys who we're waiting to see which ones just take that next step. And that's why I think sleeper is hard to pick on defense because there's 5 or 6 guys that really fit that bill. And if they get 4 of them that climb to that level, awesome. The defense doing great. If one of them does, then maybe things aren't going the way you want. Right. So last one comes from Ethan Burrow. First-time training camp attendee later this summer. Any tips that I need to know before going?
Sunscreen. Put a lot of sunscreen on. You're going to get burnt. Bring a lot of water because it's hot. We're in Flowery Branch, Georgia, and the sun is beating down. It is the middle of August, and it is swarm.
And they're football fields. They're not trees on the football field, so there's no shade.
Direct sunlight. So make sure that you bring a hat. I'm a big hat girly, case in point. So that would be my recommendation. Water, sunscreen.
I wish I could bring my house to training camp. Just sit inside. Just sit on my balcony.
Like front porch.
Exactly, right in a rocking chair.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
No, that's all great. Honestly, I'm a big wear long sleeves if you've got lightweight. Just kind of I like that as I get older.
Another one, bring binoculars.
Yeah, binoculars, great call.
So back during COVID, all of media had to sit on top of the hill, which is where all the fans sit right now. And I could never see the defensive tackles working because they work on the absolute farthest part of the field from where you sit. So bring binoculars so that you can watch those guys work.
Print out a roster. Print out a roster before you come. Try to do it just as early as or as late in the process as you can because they get updated. Get here early. Parking can be tough sometimes. There's plenty of space, but you may just have to travel a little bit further or shorter, depending on when you get here. So if you want to park a little bit closer to the fields, get here a little bit earlier. But it's a blast. Come out. It's going to be so much fun. We're really excited to have fans to come back.
Right. Fans didn't get to be there last year and because of all the construction that was happening at Flowery Branch, and I know I missed it. It was one of those things when we came back from COVID and the first year that fans were back after COVID, I remember sitting there and being like, oh, this is what training camp is.
Yep.
Getting to talk to you guys. Also say hi. Will and I will be roaming around the sidelines. Just give us a wave. Give us a peace sign.
A lot of people, Tori last year. It was great. Nobody was saying Will. Nobody. But it was great.
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. Also, I think you said, like, make sure and yell at Tori. And there were some people that
so do it again.
Did. No.
Again, don't yell at me. I'm good.
You're like, don't yell at me, yell at Tori.
Yell at Tori. But thank you guys so much for your questions. We really enjoy whenever we get to do a mailbag episode and interact with y'all. It's really, truly great to be able to touch base and check in with all of you. So please send them in more, and we will let you know if and when we set up a better system for this so we can be in constant communication. But like we said, we'll be here every Thursday until training camp. So next week, we're going to be filling out some brackets. Which brackets, you say?
TBD.
Stay tuned. But until then, everybody, for Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. We'll see you next time.